Hi everybody, and welcome to this session with Katie Paterson. While we're waiting for everyone to come in, it would be great if you could introduce yourself in the chat, if you could let us know where in the world you are and how time feels to you today. So if in the chat you could just put how time feels to you and where you are, and we'll just give folk another few minutes to arrive.
Hi.
Hey, Katie. So let's have a look. We've got Laurie from New York who says time feels crazy and rushed. Iona in Amsterdam, time feels very compressed right now. Michael in London, time feels like a Kairos moment. Charlotte in London, time feels like it's slowed down. Oh, I like this one. Greetings from Berlin, where time feels thick like how I imagine melted licorice. Great. Isabel in Edinburgh, time is slipping by quickly, feeling warped. Lauren in Geneva, time feels liminal and transitional. Carolina in Tokyo, time feels infinite. Oh, that's great. Okay, so we are going to get started. Firstly, it's just incredible to see how global a group we are today, and how varied our experience of time is. So welcome to this Long Time session. My name is Ella Saltmarsh. I'm a co-founder of the Long Time Project, and it's my real pleasure to welcome you to this session today with Katie Paterson. It's funded by EIT Climate Kick, and we're hosting this event in partnership with the RSA and the Serpentines General Ecology Network, which is supported by Outset Partners grants. And I guess it's great to see such a global group of you here today to think about these issues of the long term at a time when the issues that threaten our long-term survival as a species are really in our face in the short term. So, you know, these issues like climate change, biodiversity loss, pandemics, extinction aren't speculative anymore. In 2020, they're issues that are affecting all of our lives today. And, you know, one of the things that we can see with crises is that they can cause us to kind of hunker down. And I guess one of the challenges that we face in this moment is how can we respond to these very real needs in the present whilst also attending to the needs of future generations. And that's why we have set up the Long Time Project, to kind of cultivate care for the world that will exist beyond our lifetimes, so that we take action today to protect it. And it's why we're really delighted to be in conversation with the artist Katie Paterson today, who is doing so much to help us consider our place on Earth in the context of geological time and change. And for those who know Katie's work, you know, it connects us to the deep past and to future generations in incredibly poetic and visceral ways. You know, the way that Katie collaborates with scientists and researchers across the world to make work that like literally expands our realms. And for me, it kind of enables me to taste immensity somehow. So we're really excited for this conversation. And the way this is going to work is that Katie is going to share some of her work. She and I are going to chat, and then we're going to open the conversation up to all of you. So I'm going to stop talking and firstly just say hi and welcome to Katie, and how are you doing? Where are you and how are you doing?
Hi, thank you so much. That was such a lovely introduction, and thank you to everybody who's here, and I can see you, which is really nice. So hi, John, and many others. Yeah, I'm in Fife. I'm in Fife. I am in my studio, and that is overlooking the Firth of Forth. And yeah, I'm locked down, kind of. And I'm super happy to be here having this conversation with you.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, before you kind of dive into sharing some of your work, it would be great to know, like, when you first were called to start creating around time. Like, when did you feel the call of time?
Yeah, it actually took me quite a while. It took a bit of time before I found my feet in that area. And when I was at art school, which was like late 90s, early 2000s, a lot of the artists that I was learning about at that time, and it doesn't mean that the other artists didn't exist or didn't make the kind of work, but I was surrounded by a lot of artists who made work about themselves or made work about art, that was very much about the art world, critical theory, and it was a world that I just didn't really have a language for and felt very alienated from. And I just sort of always felt like there's got to be more than this. And so I went to Iceland. I took off and went and lived in Iceland for a while after the first degree. And I always bring this up, and it's probably a bit repetitive, but I sort of can't help it because that period was just really pivotal for me for like opening up this view to the more than human world. Because until then, kind of city kids, and then during the art studies, it was too much about art, really, is what happened. So I went there and I was surrounded by, sky and geysers and immensity of time and space. And I think it was my first genuine, like embodied experience in a landscape that time was just all around. Time was written into the landscape. It's like, it's in the strata, it's in the lava. You watch the sun kind of setting and rising again. And that just opened up a different world for me, really. And then, so from that point on, I came to London. I started making artwork that, dealt with the landscape and dealt with time, and in a more expanded sense of time that I'd known, up until that point, really. So yeah, that's where things kind of started. I got really into other subjects. I started visiting and working with the geology and astrophysics and other fields like that. And then I guess there's a nice quote by Einstein. There's two ways to live, if I get this right. One is if nothing is a miracle, and the other is if everything is a miracle. And yeah, the second way is what I try to do.
Amazing. Well, it would be great if you could talk us through how you've woven time through different pieces of your work. So I'll hand over to you.
Yeah. So I'm just going to, quite informally run through some of these works. Some of, a lot of you might know them already, but this is All the Dead Stars. It is a map of every star that has died in the whole universe until the point that I made it a few years ago. So it maps around 27,000 points of where stars have existed and lived their enormously long life over millions or even billions of years, and they've exploded and become something else. And so that work was made during a period in the astrophysics department where I was learning about these life cycles of stars. And, to my great astonishment, really, that, even though they're so immense and distant and remote in terms of years, and we're so closely related. And so, the material of stars, that they've that's made the whole planet Earth, it's made all of us, it's made all the other planets in the universe, this kind of vast cosmic recycling of things. So I made this sort of graveyard of stars, really, but yet which sort of pinpoints all the places in the universe that life has then reformed and reformed again. And yeah, I'm going to read this small quote that every single atom in your body, the calcium in your bones, the carbon in your genes, the iron in your blood, the gold in your filling, was created in a star billions of years ago. All except atoms of hydrogen and one or two of the next lightest element, and they were formed even earlier, shortly after the Big Bang began around 13.7 billion years ago. So making that work was really, really important to me, because it was quite shocking, really, to feel that connection, you know, between the very distant past and how it's brought us to where we are, and to try to get involved in learning about the history of the Earth and really expand, my viewpoint, and then the artwork's viewpoint on the very expansive universe. So that work led to making this very kind of light-hearted piece, the Dying Star Letters, where I was writing a letter every time a star died somewhere in the universe, and posting it to Professor Richard Ellis from Caltech at that moment, and he researches and works on supernovas and dying stars. So I was sending him these letters from wherever I was in the world, kind of carrying my stationary kit around with me. And the thing is that it just sped up and it sped up. And so I began, I can't remember, I think it was 5 years I worked on this. And towards the end, and I made it the end of the project, because the telescopes were beginning to be so powerful that they were just scanning the universe, and, you know, stars are dying here, there, and everywhere. So I kind of couldn't keep up. But anyway, until then, I wrote a letter according to the star pretty much every day of life. And then by the end, I was printing off, you know, reams of the letters. This work I wanted to bring up, you know, in light of what we're speaking about today, and it is the fossil necklace. And it is a string of beads that I had carved from fossilized life that charts billions of years of life on Earth. It's a kind of history of the geology of Earth and our place within it. So it begins in the pre-Cambrian era, and that little green, can you see my cursor actually on this? Yeah, so that little bead here is a fragment of a fossil that contained one of the first single-celled life to evolve on Earth. And then the necklace kind of charts its way through time, through all of the major eras and the major extinctions, and things like the first creatures to move onto land, the first things to develop wings, to see, one of the first flowering flowers ever, the first colour on Earth, and then it moves through time to our Anthropocene era, and it kind of stops there. Actually, it stops before because we came along quite late, you know, of course. But it sort of posits our history up until the point where humans kind of came on the scene, and then the path of destruction that we left and continue to leave in our wake. Those are just some of the close-up images of these beads, which still surprise me by their kind of richness of colour and texture and depth, and that they are just like planets. You know, I still can't quite believe you know, how this one is a little bit like Saturn, and, you know, they've got very like planetary feeling about them. So Future Library is a work that, you know, came after the fossils and it evolves over 100-year time span. So it's actually quite short, you know, compared to working with the stars that took millions, billions of years, and then the sort of evolution of Earth. 100 years is our human life, or just beyond it. And so therefore, I feel like it's something that we can all connect to and kind of posit ourselves within. So it is a forest here, and the forest is on the outskirts of Oslo. And I planted 1,000 trees, and we did that in 2014. And these tiny saplings are going to grow over the next, till now, it's 96 years now. And when they're fully grown, they're going to be cut and harvested and pulped and printed as a book or a series, an anthology of many short books, written by authors now and never read until the century has passed. So it's a very long, slow artwork that evolves over, you know, our lives, over my life. It's organic, it's moving and it's changing, but yet the full kind of fruition of it comes after we're, and all of us, most likely that are alive right now, are gone. This is one of the saplings that we planted. They're already a foot or two, actually, after these first 6 years. And so the authors we've invited, they are asked to contribute a new piece of writing that will be kind of sealed away in this project and never read until the trees are fully grown. So our first author was Margaret Atwood, which was spectacular. Then we had David Mitchell, Sean from Iceland, El Shafak from Turkey, Han Kang from South Korea, and this year's author is Karlovy Knausgaard. And we're actually yet to have the handover because, of course, things have been postponed, but we're really looking forward to the moment that Karlovy Knausgaard lives in London also, so we're kind of waiting for the borders to open so that we can be there. We thought about streaming it, but actually for him, it was and is extremely important to be there in the forest, because in the forest we gather every year. It's free and open to everybody, and the author is invited to bring their manuscript and take a walk to the future library forest, which is within a much larger forest on the outskirts of Oslo, the Nordmarka forest. And the author, it's a very simple, you know, straightforward thing. It's very grounded, and we walk to the forest. The author gives a reading, and sometimes we've had music. We've had a golden harp in the forest. We've had a choir, and the author kind of determines what they want to happen that day. But effectively, it's a ceremony to kind of celebrate their piece of writing that nobody will read right now, and to pass it over to those unborn future generations. So this is an image from Han Kang's the last handover, which was immensely special. She brought with her a white cloth from South Korea, and she dragged it through the whole forest. And for our walk, it was totally silent this year. We were just walking with Kang in front of us with her cloth. And then when we all reached the gathering in the trees, she decided to wrap her manuscript in the white cloth, seal it away, and at that point it was kind of coated in the forest floor, in the mud and so on. And then she described it as being like a wedding and a funeral, where she was kind of saying goodbye to her manuscript and passing it over. So every year we have that ceremony, and we invite you and anybody who wants to come when it becomes possible. It is very special. It's you know, it's just a forest, but it's a coming together, and it is a kind of celebrating of, or like a seeing, maybe not a celebrating, but a seeing of those people that aren't here yet, but yet whose future, you know, we're absolutely, they're in our, you know, it's in our hands right now. So something special that's going to be happening with this project this year is this is a new library in Oslo, in Bjørvika, beside the Opera House, which is here on the right. And I have had the pleasure to work with the architects of the new library, Lundhagen and Atelier Oslo, to design a room which is going to hold the manuscripts for the next century. So this is a little sneak picture of it, because it's not open to the public yet, but we will soon. And it's actually made of the wood that we cut to make space for planting the new saplings back in 2014. So we've been storing that wood for that time, and now it's become this room. And the pieces have been cut into something like 40,000 individual sections, and these apertures or drawers made with cast glass. So the author's manuscripts are going to slip inside these drawers that got pushed in, and there's a key, you know, the underlock and key, and the light goes on, and their names will light up and the year, and we'll get to see a little glimpse of the paper of their manuscript, but nothing else. So it's a small, intimate, quite meditative space where people can go and be kind of transported really through their imaginations into this distant but not so distant time of when the first readers will open these pages. So it's an artwork that goes on, you know, for my whole life. I absolutely love working on it. It kind of fulfills so many different dimensions, like all the collaborations with the architects and librarians and the authors and the foresters, and it evolves over slow time, which is quite a luxury. And yeah, this is the view upwards into the ceiling of the room. And you can just imagine really and we will have 6 manuscripts to enter when we open it, and then all the rest will be to come. And so this is a work that was very recent and is still actually on at the Scottish National Gallery of Modern Art, which happily for me opened back up, and the exhibition is extended till January. And this is called The Cosmic Spectrum. And it is spinning. You can't see it here, but it's a spinning disk of colour that charts the colours of the universe from its very beginning to its potential end. So it's a large disk. It spins quite quickly, and the colours merge together. And I worked on this with a number of different scientists to try to determine the colour of each era in evolution of the universe. And I did so because I found this wonderful word, cosmic latte, which describes the colour of the universe right now. Like our moment is beige. It's the colour of a latte. And so I figured, well, if you can determine the colour of our moment, and our moment is the stelliferous era, the era of the stars, and that was done by analysing starlight. In that case, you know, given how much we know through the advancement of telescopes and so on, how much we know about the beginning of the universe and other stars, can you go back in time and come up with a colour for the beginning of the universe effectively, and then the beginning of the stars? And then can you go forward in time past us and to the potential end of the universe, which, you know, has been posited as the big crunch, where the stars and galaxies and everything that we know will gradually rip apart. And can you come up with those colours? And it is what we did. It wasn't really a very easy request, because, as you know, it's not something that's been investigated very much, but we managed. And yeah, several astronomers worked with the colour coordinates and the analysing of hundreds of thousands of galaxies to take the starlight. So effectively, this artwork is like a history of starlight, and we're in this phase here, which is the kind of cosmic latte phase. This lovely blue colour is the beginning of the stars. And then we're going to go into a period where the stars start to burn out. They become more and more maroon. And then eventually we kind of fade off into the darkness of the potential end of the universe. And then it starts back up. In this artwork, anyway, it starts back up. And then, continues to spin. So that was like a real investigation into very deep time, probably like the deepest time that I could, that we know of in terms of going right back to the sort of origins of where everything began, and then trying to, travel forward to the potential ends. And then lastly, I'm just going to talk a little bit about a current work that I'm doing, which is for Helsinki next summer. And it's incense. And so I'm creating incense that smells of the first ever forest on Earth and the last ever forest on Earth. So 2 incense sticks. And the first one will burn and recreate the scent, not only of the trees, but of the soil and the atmosphere and life as it was at that moment. And so it recreates the scent of the Cairo forest in New York State, or what is now New York State. It was something very different then. But yeah, so it's 384 million years ago, and it's actually a time before even any vertebrates existed. So when we've been working on this, we've been trying to construct a whole image, a whole sensory image of the forest as it was then. And so I'll read a few descriptions. I've got a kind of scent chart in the making here. So the first forest environment, 385 million years ago, a few miles from the Hudson Valley. We've got humidity, quiet, rain and wind in the vegetation would have been the only sounds. Stream water running through clay mud. This aroma is earthy, a little bit like the smell of freshly turned soil. Liverwort, which is something that exists now, so we're smelling that. Moss, fungi, rotting vegetation, swamp, seawater, quartz and sandstone and clay, green, dry. Wet grass, hay, the aroma has a hint of bitterness. The crushed leaf has a very clean green aroma, like torn baby lettuce leaves. So those descriptions are currently being sent off to the wonderful Shoyedo and Incense maker in Japan that we're collaborating with to bring those sensory images to life. And the perfumer there is posting samples to us, which we're burning and then kind of adjusting, which is a lovely experience. And then the last forest is what we're working on right now, which we're sort of defining as the last forest in the age of climate change. And I should mention these incense sticks are going to be burned all over Helsinki in at least one permanent location all over summer, and also out of people's windows and public squares. We'll be taking a visit to the forest where we'll burn it, live in a forest. And so it'll be individual small events and kind of long-term events, and then after Helsinki, I'm sure it's going to go elsewhere. But the last forest is what I'm working on right now, and I'm sure we'll get into the climate change conversation. Right, we've decided to go with the Amazon after many discussions with different scientists. It's very clearly on the brink of, it's not even on the brink, it's during an enormous environmental catastrophe right now of extreme deforestation, release of immense amounts of carbon into the atmosphere, and an extreme loss of biodiversity. The Amazon rainforest is like one of the most diverse places on Earth. It sustains so much life, and it's being burnt to the ground effectively. So we are recreating the scent of the Amazon as it is right now, because I'd like to try to, through this kind of sensory encounter, create an experience where we can smell what we have. We have so much. We have so much life. We have so much diversity, and it's utterly threatened, and it's utterly devastating. And so it's an artwork to try to connect with issues through our senses, and perhaps even through a kind of emotional impact, in order to make changes, really. So this is just a happy coincidence. When we were talking to the Japanese incense makers, they said, "But do you know what the kanji is for incense?" And I said, "No," and it is to burn forest fire. That's what incense translates as. So that's become the title of the work. And I'll probably end here so that we can talk more.
Great, thank you, Katie. I've got to say, you've left me a little bit tearful with.
Oh no, don't, because I'm so on the brink. This could be the moment. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna keep talking so that. Well, I think one of the things that we can see in this kind of walk through your work is how multi-sensory it is. And I guess, at the Long Time Project, we speak to politicians, philosophers, economists, geologists about how we can become more long-term as a society. And so it'd be great to hear your reflections on what you think art can do. What are the qualities of art that can help us become more long-term?
I think what's always appealed to me to make art, in the first place, and to be involved in it, is I think that it can, not all art clearly, but some artworks can really shift, and music and poetry and literature, and they can shift our registers about things, and we can connect to things in it's got many languages. Art can speak in so many different languages, and it can be emotional and intuitive, and it can communicate in other dimensions effectively. And I think especially right now, when a lot of information is coming at us, a lot of information, and a lot of it's in numbers and graphs and terrifying statistics. And the thing is that I think it's really important to be able to connect to the more than human world, and art can be a way into that. It can, in the best possible way, open up our relationship to the much wider world beyond us. And that's the same with so many different areas like geology and astrophysics and so on. But I think for me, art has got no boundaries. It doesn't. You're not limited by. Okay, there's some boundaries, but you're not limited by much. And the imagination is also something that keeps me going, imagination and creativity. And I feel like those are things that we just we have to grasp onto right now, particularly, and we have to be able to widen our viewpoint, and open our horizons. And so, time within that, I kind of work with time as a material, effectively, as a tool, and either making artwork that can allow us to travel through time, and even through the process of the kind of learning of it myself, that's quite enriching, and can just open up to other, just a much wider sense than humans, even though we've taken over so much of the biosphere. I just think that perspective, I want that perspective just now. So yeah.
Yeah. Definitely, that really resonates with my experience of working in this area. It's so personally meaningful, and it's constantly changing the way I see myself on this planet. So, and actually, before I go to my next question, just to everybody here, we're going to open it up for questions in about 5 minutes. So do feel free to start writing questions in the chat now.
Yeah.
And we'll come to them in a little bit. So, coming back to that last piece, and the way you're talking about the last forest, already, even before I've seen the work, it has me in tears. So I'm really interested in this connection between art and activism, and whether you see yourself as an activist, and like just how that relationship lives within you.
Yeah, so I started making artwork, I guess, about 12 years ago, really, the point where I sort of felt confident that this is something that could go out into the world. And at that time, so the first work that I made really was, putting this microphone inside a glacier that people could dial and listen to. And of course, it connected with the sort of dissolution of Earth and time and phenomena and landscape. But I was really reluctant then to, I remember like a blog coming up at that time in treehugger.com. And I remember being really pissed off because I was like, oh, I know this is important, but actually it's not really what I was trying to do, because I didn't really know what I was trying to do. It was 12 years ago, and I guess I was just thinking, give me a bit more time, give me some time, and I'll show you that there's other things that I'm going to do. And I guess that's what's happened. And now, because that time's passed, I'm actually quite happy now to go, yes, of course, those are my cares and perspectives. And it's just that I think earlier on, for me, the word activist, it just seemed a bit shouty, or it seemed a bit too political, to things that I just really am not, shouty or political. And I felt like the artwork that I make, or, I'm going to make, kind of whispers, it's so maybe I'm a whispering activist. But it's it's over the years, it's just become more and more pressing, of course. And my materials are nature and the landscape and time and space and the deeper cosmos. And anybody that's working within that area, we can't ignore what's happening all around us right now. And it's just become more and more obvious. And actually, on that note, would you mind? I thought I might read. I've been doing quite a bit of research recently, and for the Incense and other projects. And if you're crying now, be warned, because this is. But yeah, I'm just going to read some of it, and it's various different people. And I apologise in advance. I'm probably going to get names wrong, and so on. So, but anyway, the big question for me is, what have humans done? And this is Emma Thompson. All humans know, somewhere deep down, somewhere like our spinal cords, somewhere that we're not used to communicating with, that our planet is suffering. We know at a cellular level, and it's causing us huge distress. It's hard to let go of all of our addictions, so hard, but let go we must if we and the greater web of life, of which we are all part, after all, only a part, are to survive. From David Farrier in Footprints, which I highly recommend. All over the world, the seas are suffocating and draining of life. The shadow of extinction races around our planet, threatening to engulf the light of life. Up to 200 species a day fall under permanent shadow. The biosphere is under assault, and cities are sinking. From Arne Snare Magnusson, human beings have been setting off the equivalent of 650 volcanoes every day for years and years. From Elizabeth Kohlberg, within the next 50 years or so, all coral reefs will cease to grow and start to dissolve. These days, every wild place has, to one degree or another, been cut into and cut off. It's estimated that 1/3 of all reef-building corals, 1/3 of all freshwater mollusks, 1/3 of sharks and rays, 1/4 of all mammals, 1/5 of all reptiles, and 1/6 of all birds are headed towards oblivion. We're seeing right now that a mass extinction can be caused by human beings. And from Jan Zalovich, is one of the geologists that I'm working on with the Incense and other things. We're agents of geological change. We have fundamentally altered the biosphere. It's different from any prior state on Earth. We've changed the dynamics of the ocean. We've altered the range of species across the surface of the planet. We're heading towards a major extinction. Current rates of extinction are 1,000 times the background level, and 97% of the terrestrial vertebrate biomass, like all the weight of everything that's alive, is us and the things that we've domesticated. Like there's more chickens on Earth than anything else. We've also found, it's like absurd, but it's true. This is entirely unique from a geological perspective. 75% of the ice-free landscape of Earth is dominated by humans. You know, it seems more likely than not, geologically, very soon there will be another emptying of ecospace. The crisis is not imminent, the crisis is here. David Wallace Wells predicts that the 22nd century will be a century of hell. Our civilization faces inevitable near-term collapse due to climate change. And due to worsening nuclear threat, lack of climate action, the doomsday clock is now 100 seconds to midnight. And finally, there's a 1 in 6 chance that humans don't make it through the century. That was Toby Ord in one of your sessions. And safeguarding our future is amongst the most pressing and neglected issues we face. You know, so to be honest, I don't think I have the option anymore to be passive. I don't think any of us do. I think like active is actually the only way that we can be. And to be, you know, to take all of this and to create some kind of active hope, basically, and to, you know, and to make change.
Thanks, Katie. That's left me without words. So I'm gonna I'm gonna go to everyone else's questions now.
Those are kind of quotes that I've like built up over a long time, and I just thought, you know, I'm going to put these together and face this actually, you know. But you know, maybe I'll say something more positive before we open up to the questions, because you know, yeah. We have to, you know, we have to. So I think that through connecting with like extremely deep timescales, and it was Marcia Bjornid's talk that you presented like at the beginning of the sessions, that's amazing as well. And I just, you know, she describes this need to be more timeful and to have like polytemporal views and ways of thinking. And I loved what she said, that we can recognize that there are versions of the world that came before ours, and there will be versions that don't include us. And the understanding that is part of understanding that we're part of this continuum is a comfort. You know, I'm part of this world now, and it'll go on when I'm not here. And through that, you know, we can redefine the path that we're on. And so I'm just going to lastly like read a little bit from Timothy Morton. Hang on a sec if I can find it. I've got so many things printed here. Because, you know, we have to learn how to connect with the more than human world, the non-human world. And I do firmly believe that, you know, the environment, nature, it isn't something just out there. It is us. It's everywhere. It's everything. And we're connected to the landscape. We're connected to future generations through everything, through the air, through the water, the soil. So Timothy Morton said, the ecological crisis we face is so obvious that it becomes easy for some, strangely or frighteningly easy, to join the dots and see that everything's interconnected. This is the ecological thought. And the more we consider it, the more the world opens up. We're all burnt by ultraviolet rays. We all contain water in about the same ratio as Earth does, and salt water in the same ratio that the oceans do. Nature is animals, trees, the weather, the bioregion, the ecosystem. It's both the set and the contents of the set. It is the world and the entities in that world. It appears like a ghost at the never arriving end of an infinite series. Crabs, waves, lightning, rabbits, silicon, and nature. I love that description. And so, yeah, I think like for me, the most positive way to sort of deal with these immense issues is to try to open ourselves up to this much larger kind of continuum of time and space. So yeah.
Okay, let's have some questions from you. There's lots in the chat. So maybe Katie, I'll pull one out, and then while we're doing that one, maybe you can have a look and see some of the ones you'd like to answer. I'm going to ask this question from someone called Rabe, and it's the question that's about. Could you tell a little bit about what ways, also beyond the art bubble, people here know about your works and engage with them? Have you found ways for yourself to bridge that gap between people associated with the art scene and everyone else?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, good question. I guess I try to kind of exhibit work and take on commissions and so on that are very public. A lot of the time I've done quite a lot of public commissions. And then artworks like Future Library are like, you know, very public, like they exist in the open, free, common land in Norway. And exhibitions that I do, I hope anyway, are, you know, as inclusive as they can be. And because I think like the kind of subjects that I work with, the moon and the stars and, you know, glaciers, and these are all like phenomena that we can relate to without being, you know, in the art world, as it were, or having that kind of background knowledge. And so when I make a work, I always try to come at it, you know, from that point of view. Like, I don't want to need to know anything. I just need to know the thing, you know, the kind of, and have a kind of immediate effect. So yeah, I mean, I guess I try to do talks and do things that, and, you know, primary kids talks and things like that as well, to just try and open up to beyond. And so, I mean, so much of what I do is sort of beyond art establishments and institutes anyway. You know, a lot of the collaborations are taking place with universities or, you know, institutes, and anyway, even within art institutions, like things are so open and wide, that it's, yeah, I hope the artwork can be accessible and can reach people.
Great. Is there a question that speaks to you there, Katie?
Hang on, let me turn the thing on. Right. Oh goodness, there's so many questions. You pick one, Ella. I can't concentrate.
Okay, well, I'll ask a question that's a kind of combination of Polly and Scott, because people are interested in your process, and the fact that your work is really grounded in scientific theory. So, like, how do you choose who to collaborate with? How do you choose when to collaborate?
Well, the idea behind the artwork usually sort of comes, or not the idea behind it, but the idea of what it is, like, comes at the beginning of everything. So, you know, whether that's like, oh, I want to make a phone link to glacier, or make a light bulb that simulates the light of the moon, and so on. So, like, that initial idea, like, very much kind of dictates what's going to happen next, like who we're going to go to. Normally experts in whatever field that might be, from like stellar black holes to, you know, or like incense making, you know, it's really, really broad, and clock making and perfumery and geology and so on. So yeah, it's sort of determined by whatever the idea is that we're trying to work on. And I say we because it's like me and a really small team of like two others basically, and then whoever we kind of collaborate with. But over the years, it's been quite remarkable, the kind of response. And so I've done residencies in astrophysics departments and at the Sanger Institute in Cambridge, and I'm doing a commission at the moment for Edinburgh University. So the kind of people that we can call upon is, immensely expanded, which is amazing, and NASA also. So it's sort of like, we have an idea which might seem quite outrageous, well, which usually is quite outrageous. And then we think, well, somebody's going to know how to do this, hopefully, or if we can't do it, or so on. So it's like, for me, it's the having the ideas, and then, kind of having our expanded group of people who can help bring them to life, really.
And following on from that, a kind of fun question from Fiona, which is that your artworks always encompass so much research and so many seemingly impossible concepts. Has there ever been a project that you've started that has proved impossible to create in a physical sense?
Oh, that's so nice. Hi, Fiona. Yeah, many. That's kind of why I made a book of ideas. I've got a book of like 120 ideas for projects, and like many of them are meant to just stay as words, because they can literally, never exist in the world as it is right now. We've usually got about 15 projects sort of balancing on the go, maybe not 15, maybe 10 to 15. And so many that I just forget what they are, so I have to write them down sometimes. And what's like, no, I mean, we've been really lucky in that everything that we've really put our minds to, we've managed to make happen. And, of course, the other problem is, like, from the outset, we don't really know, we're not astronomers and so on. So I might have an idea like, okay, let's map all the dead stars in the universe. But there could be 5 or 5 billion, for all that I know. So it's kind of going on an instinct and then seeing if it's feasible. Like, it's a really practical thing. We do a lot of like R&D phases. We do like a feasibility phase with every project, and because I might promise things to people and go, oh yeah, I've got this great idea, let's do this. One of which is to make an ice rink made of every glacier on Earth. But how on earth do we do that? I don't know. So it needs other people to have the gumption to like take it on. And luckily, people like the director of Future Library, Anna Beata Hovland in Oslo, it's one of those people that's taken something that's pretty risky, let's face it, to make 100-year artwork. That's a forest. That's not even. It was meant to be like a physical thing somewhere on a harbour in Oslo, and we've gone and grown a forest. That nobody will see the words for 100 years. So it's. They might seem impossible at the beginning, and there's been many times where I've been like, okay, we're going to have to just put a pause on this one, or maybe this isn't going to go anywhere. But then it'll surprise us, and a couple of years later, maybe something will arise, and then that's the moment to go, okay, let's do it. Yeah.
Great. There's a really good question here from either Edie or Eddie Ingleby, which is basically this relationship between how does kind of engaging with the long term change the way we act in the short term, and it's to kind of dig into that question a bit more. They say, you mentioned the need to open ourselves up to a much larger continuum of time and space in order to change the path that we're on. So is this because of a belief in human empathy that we'll feel a sense of responsibility to the past and future? And where does your belief that understanding our connection to deep time and space will lead to making change come from? Which is a great question.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you, Edie. Hi, Edie. Yeah, I mean, human empathy, like don't we all feel it in our bones? I mean, I love what Emma Thompson had written. We do feel it in our bones. But to be human, like, is to accept and to embrace that there's so much beyond us. And even if we just care about us, we've got to expand our time horizons. We've absolutely got to learn how to, like, either go back into deep time and embrace this like 7-generation thinking, you know, of back from our great grandparents to our great grandchildren, and cathedral thinking beyond our time. And I love you said it's a belief that I share, I'm just not sure why. Me too, but you know, I think that's because it's like it's care and love actually. And I think, you know, that's kind of what we've got to do. We've got to embrace, you know, how can we save things? How can we protect things if we don't care about them and love them? You know, ultimately, it's like we've got to learn how to accept ourselves as part of a much wider continuum of existence that's gone on for so long and will continue to go on for so long. And to like project, you know, like something I found really interesting, I'm going diverging a bit, but with the COVID thing is, you know, the idea of compassion and empathy, because it's, you know, one of the slogans in the UK anyway, it's like stay at home, save lives and save the NHS. And so there's this sort of feeling like, okay, if I put a foot wrong here, potentially I'm going to affect somebody else's life. And we get that, don't we? And people behave because they're scared to like end up the repercussions affecting somebody else. And I feel like, well, if we can expand that view and that kind of feeling of compassion and not wanting to hurt, you know, that's kind of what we need to do, like into the really deep future. And actually, I'm going to read something else, and this is David Farrier, who I think is there. Hello, and you just put it so beautifully. So I'm just going to read what you said. The importance of the task to see here and now changes that will unfold over many lifetimes, and to feel our closeness to those lives as an acute, intimate responsibility can't be overstated. Future fossils, and I would extend that to like deep fossils and stars and the universe, show us that we aren't obligated only to the generations that will directly follow ours, the children of our children's children, but to humans who are separated by hundreds, even thousands of generations. These are people whose languages and cultures will be wholly alien to what we know or can even imagine, but who may have to live in a world still warped by our decisions made millennia before their birth. The better we learn to see the new world that's promised by our inaction, the better, I believe, we will be able to imagine an alternative for ourselves and for those who follow us. So I think that's so beautifully put. And also Roman Krzanek, and again, apologies for that awful pronunciation, but The Good Ancestor is just like the most wonderful book, and I'm going to read just two lines from it. We need to recognize our symbiotic relationship with the planetary whole and to respect its natural boundaries and capacities. We can derive purpose from striving to secure the flourishing of life generation after generation. Let the living world act as a compass for humanity. So yeah, I think that just puts it so well. Let the living world act as a compass.
And we are pretty much at time, so that's a kind of incredible place to finish. And I think, like, to leave us all with this question of what does it mean to be a good ancestor? And today, like, you know, Katie, you've been talking about, like indirectly, but you've been talking about how through all your work, actually, this is a way of you being a good ancestor through your art.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I think, I mean, it's so difficult, isn't it? But to start with, read The Good Ancestor by Roman, because, you know, that sets out the most amazing ways that we can, you know, develop this, like, our marshmallow brains into our acorn brains and help take the longer view. I mean, for me, it's like almost about recognizing and remembering, you know, of what's going on right now. And yeah, it probably is our greatest responsibility, isn't it, to try to leave a future for people that's so much better than the one that we're managing to do right now. And I think it's to do with, you know, like I said, kind of cherishing and caring for everybody around us and life, and ultimately that all life is sacred. You know, that sounds huge. That's because it is huge. All life is sacred, you know, and we kind of generally treat the earth like it's, you know, that's just here for us, you know, and it's just so not. It's just that we now have, you know, overtaken these geological and so on boundaries. But I think it comes down to that, you know, care and love and trust and hope and all of these things that feel like really in short supply right now. For me, those are how to be a good ancestor.
Amazing. I think, like, for the Long Time project, we talk about long timeism compared to long termism. And so if long termism is about how do we prepare for the future, how do we plan for the long-term future, and long timeism is how do we cultivate care for the world that will exist beyond our lifetime. So it's very much about this cultivation of care for the future. And I think that's what your work evokes, is an attitude of care for the present and the future. And I, you know, I just want to thank you for this conversation, for its kind of depth and breadth and insight and tears. And in some ways I can't wait to smell the incense, and in other ways I'm quite scared of smelling the incense. Yeah, just
thank you so much. You know, obviously I think it's like invaluable what you're doing, and you know, it's the more people come together like this, and actually, you know, these are not comfortable things to be talking about or thinking about or feeling, but you know, that's even more reason to be doing it, I suppose. So yeah, thank you everybody for joining.
Yeah, thank you all for being here with us, and let's all go out and reflect on what it means for us to be good ancestors today. So we'll be posting a video of this, and so we'll let folk know when that's around, so you can share this conversation with others. But in the meantime, yeah, thank you all for being here, and Katie, a massive thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. Take care.
Bye everyone.